Hey everyone, Anthony here, and I'm with Tracy and Carol. And today we're going to be chatting about evidence of the afterlife, and we'll discuss some of our own experiences with that. I know some people, myself included, where the afterlife doesn't even enter our consciousness until we experience the loss of a loved one. And then suddenly we're struck with that question, is there an afterlife? So why don't we start there?
Yeah, for myself, I didn't have that question because I kind of always believed in the afterlife from a child on, and that never left me. And even when I experienced the loss of my son, I did not think that that wasn't still the case. And so I was already very open to receiving signs from my loved one, my son, because I knew that it just knew in my heart that there is more than just the physical life that we have. So I was looking for those kinds of things right from the start. But I realized that my story is not everybody's story.
Well, I've always been curious, and it's kind of funny. I was thinking about the question, and the first thing that came to mind is my childhood and thinking about how other people in general might feel that they've experienced it or questioned it or were curious about it. And for me, there was always like a little, oh, there's a ghost around, like ghost stories, like, or things like this. And so my mind would go to like, "Oh, yeah, they're always here," or I'd have like weird little experiences. I feel like children are so open that they don't question as much, and that makes me curious as an adult to figure out what could even be deemed as evidence. I feel like there's so many things, and so from a young age, I've always experienced things that I had an inner knowing, I guess, that they were there. The question for me was more like, how do I get evidence of it? How do I get something tangible that I can cling on to? And that's a whole different journey that evolves, I feel, as we get older or more into our own journey with the subject, and that there really is no like limit to it. Equally, like something really minimal can be something very evidential for somebody. And some people feel even on different days they need some kind of louder evidence. So I just think it's all very fascinating.
But like when the two of you talk there, so I would be thinking I'm a bit of an outlier, right? Because I might be more logical or more skeptic or didn't have the experiences as a child. So I was thinking there actually, Tracy, when you're on about, like, I always tell people find their inner child because children are just much better at experiencing spirit and all of that stuff. And years ago there, I had the light bulb moment where I was like, Mother of Jesus, I was better at manifesting as a child than I am as an adult. So it was just one example of, I was like, there's the child, no rules, no regulations, just open to something. And then suddenly they have that experience. I seemed to be on a roll when I was a child. Whereas as an adult, you keep thinking about it and it's frustrating. So in the same way with spirit and evidence of the afterlife, I would be skeptic initially and I would want validation, and I want it again and again and again. I always say spirit are going to, like, Jesus Christ, give him a slap across the head or something just to shut him up. And so it stops coming back. But the reason I phrased the question like that at the start is because I think I told you last week when I gave up on organized religion and stuff. So then I became, I suppose, essentially an atheist. And then when my father passed, suddenly I started asking questions again. And I think it was from that point on that I decided to be more open and just allow it. And I'm still working on trusting it. But that's my point, that I was like, it's a journey for me in a different way than it is free. So like, Carl, even to me, you're a medium. You've always been a medium. You're on that journey since you were a child, and you have you have a longer kind of experience as well of, let's say, interacting with spirit
Mm-hmm.
than I would. But there's nothing wrong with that. Like, obviously everyone has their own journey, but I'm just saying that I needed that validation over and over and over again, whereas you might trust it more because you're used to it as a child.
Yeah, well, and I said, I think last week as well, like my first experience was seeing my grandmother who passed, and I was very young, and seeing her as a child here after her death in her favorite chair in the living room made me go, okay, well, there is such thing as life after life, because here she is and she's talking to me. And I'm a child, so I totally believed that. So I just carried that with me. Like, I never doubted that that happened. It was scary. I didn't necessarily want it to happen all of the time, but I didn't doubt that that was for real because, again, that faith of a child. So there wasn't a skeptic in me.
And you just accepted she was there.
Accepted she was there, knew she was there. I still don't doubt that story. I don't doubt she was there. So when I lost my son, like, I knew he was going to be there for me. So I immediately started looking for signs from him. And I remember the first, let's say, summer warm season after he passed, I was floating around in the lake and very much thinking of him and missing him. And I had my hands up in front of me because I was sitting on a float. And so my hands were just resting on the float, let's say like an inner tube or something. And this dragonfly came and landed on my hand. And it sat there for an hour on my hand. Didn't leave, sat there for an hour. And boy, my arm was tired after a while because I didn't want to move. But the dragonfly had blue eyes, and my son had the bluest eyes you've ever seen. And so I really felt like, because the dragonfly's eyes were blue too, in addition to, the wings and all the bits. And after a while, it started flying away, and then it would come back, and then it would fly away, and it would come back. And that was another hour. In the meantime, I'm shriveling like a prune because I'm not about to get out of the water because I feel like this is my sign. This is my evidence that he is here and he's listening, and he sent me this in a way that will help me think about him with those blue eyes that it had. And so for me, that was kind of validation of, I'm thinking of you, wishing for you, looking for a sign from you. And here we go. Here's the dragonfly. So I told my kids that story, my family that story afterwards. And I was so amazed. And wow, isn't that great? He sent me this dragonfly and yada, yada. And they just looked at me like I was nuts. And I was so bummed because I'm like, this is evidence for me. I believe it. I totally believe it. I know that he sent that. And it took a while, but they came around to it. They were much younger then. They were teenagers. So, what are they going to believe? But they have come around since then. And so now they actually give me gifts that include dragonflies, or they will point one out, or they'll talk about it. So they were the skeptics in that sense of, is that really evidence?
I'm glad you gave that story, because I was just going to ask, what if a skeptic torpedoed that lovely story of yours? And then you're like, my family already done it, kind of thing.
Exactly. If your family doesn't believe you, what are you going to do? But it's subjective too. That's evidence for me. Is it evidence enough for you? You don't have to believe my story, but I felt his presence. And that's probably part of it too. His essence was there with me, his spirit, if you will, I could feel. And that really lent itself to being very evidential for me. And that's not tangible. But to me personally, it was physically tangible. So I can't prove that to you, can't pass that feeling on to you about it. All I can do is tell you the story.
I think it is like evidence is such a logical, like, here's a word that fits in the box. And evidence is really subjective to who it's for. I feel like, especially with the afterlife, I guess the one coined thing that mediums at least will say is like, you'll hear that more people than not deem as evidence is like, there's no way anybody but me could have known that piece of information. Like if it's coming from like a medium, let's say, then that's more widely deemed as quote unquote evidence. But I love your story, Carol, because you had this foundation of already knowing, and that was so personal for you and touching for you. And you didn't need the validation from anybody else. You knew. And I think part of our journey to accept evidence of the afterlife is just that. It's a personal journey. And so I think one of the things that bums me out is I think there's a time in our lives when we do doubt, and we all kind of go through our own journey with that anyway. But I think the stronger we get with the knowing that there's an afterlife through our own experiences, the more we don't let other people's opinions sway it. So I feel like for people that are having this question, if they just can be more like Anthony said, like through a child's eyes, and work on being open and allowing it to come in whatever form, is really going to build the types of evidence you get and what you allow into your life. And I think part of that journey is just building up who you are as a person and your strength within yourself. that will allow more evidence to come in. Because I think for me, when I was a kid and I had like the ghost stories and all these scary movies and we do Bloody Mary in the bathroom, I always knew like something was around, but so I did have a knowing that there was other things happening that were afterlife, if you will, but I didn't like I had a fear around it. There's some people that have that, right? But also I wanted to know more, like where is it coming from? How does that work? That's kind of how I didn't doubt that there was something, but I didn't know how to access it for me.
But did you always allow it, Tracy?
Yeah, I didn't really have a filter on what I allowed. So, that can get a little messy and confusing, if that makes sense.
But I think some people don't realize that, and I can just speak on it then from experience. So in other words, like Carol allows spirit, let's say, because she's experiencing it since she was young. Same with you, even though you're deciding what to allow and not to allow, but you're still somewhat open from a young age. But it's almost like I had to have that switch. It's like the thing where you realize that by being skeptical or by being too kind of rigid on what you're open to, then you don't get the evidence. You don't get validation because you're looking for, let's say, one particular thing and they're trying to communicate in another form. So that's why I think like a hugely important thing is to be open to, let's say, all experiences and then allow it. And as well, like you said a while ago, I think a lot of people go to kind of third party, let's say, to validate the afterlife. In other words, they go to a medium and they want the medium then to blow their mind and prove that the afterlife is real. Whereas I think spirit wants is for everyone to discover for themselves and not through someone else. I will not take somebody else's word for it or read it from a book or, like I'm not going to believe in an afterlife because you said it. I like the two of these. More often not, I'll ask questions because I'll become curious because I'll want to discover it for myself. And I think spirit in general wants everyone to have their own journey and not accept somebody else's journey as, let's say, the word or the truth or the gospel, whatever you want to call it. You know what I mean?
And yet sometimes we kind of need that backup validation of going to a medium and getting that evidence. Because I know I did that. I know you did that. I
That
know
sparked
Tracy
my
did that.
curiosity. So yeah, you do need that. But I'm saying you can't rely on it.
Why not? If it feels right, why can't you rely on that? If you feel like you can't see the evidence for yourself of your own loved one, why can't you rely on somebody else to help you?
You can. I totally offer evidential mediumship and going to see a medium. And actually, that's really exciting. And obviously, we all do that. But I'm saying I wouldn't put my sole belief in the afterlife on what other people are telling me. So I wouldn't keep going to mediums to validate that for me. Instead, it should spark a curiosity that you say, geez, there must be something here. And then you go and try and start discovering it for yourself, or you become more open, even if it's just that. Even if you didn't believe in an afterlife before and you went to a medium, they shocked you and you're like, Jesus, like, there has to be something there. If that just makes you become more open, that's a positive thing because then you're open to getting those experiences. That's what will come after the reading.
Right. It's a jump start there.
Yeah.
Good. Somebody started on their journey.
Yeah, and I think it's important to not I agree with Anthony and probably you, Carol. I don't think somebody should solely depend on somebody else constantly validating that for them, because I feel it could, I'm not, I can't say because I'm not everybody, but I think it could stop you from learning more about yourself, which is where you get to a place in your journey to be more open of knowing who you are, to what you'll accept, to what you're going to be open with, and be more comfortable with trusting yourself, because that kind of brings the allowance and openness to where you can have more experiences for yourself. Because one of the things I have seen happen from people, let's say, who go get a evidential reading, is they'll get this feeling and this knowing, but then they talk to if they're so impressionable that they're getting this information from a medium, let's say, then they'll go talk to their close group of friends and it'll kind of diminish it for them. And then they have to go back and get it validated. And I feel like part of the spiritual journey, or everybody has some sort of spiritual journey in my eyes, because we're all human and spirit. Part of the beauty of allowing and getting to know your spirit side better brings you closer to the afterlife in spirit. So I just feel like that could be really helpful to not just close it off to like a evidential reading, because it doesn't help you I said too much, but you know what I'm saying. I think. Or not.
Keep going, Tracy.
No.
But you're right, because then look at Karen's experience there a while ago with her son. That is like a beautiful experience. I'm sorry, but like the dragonfly doesn't hang around for that long, right?
Yeah.
And it meant so much to you, Karen. But then if you went and left the opinions of, and I know like they're your family, so we can say it, but like if you left their opinion, then diminish that experience for you, that would be nothing more than just sad, because
Yeah.
I wouldn't want anyone else's thought or opinions to diminish that experience that you had in that moment with your son who is in spirit.
Right. But I also look at it as, okay, if you're going to be a skeptic about it, and again, that was just my personal experience, prove to me the other side of it. Prove to me there isn't an afterlife. And what evidence do you have of that? So at least I have an experience that shows me, some kind of validation for myself, but no one's ever been able to give me evidence that there is no afterlife. And I found that very interesting. No one ever looks at the other side of that, the skeptic side of that.
But could you see your sign happening to someone who is a complete skeptic?
Yeah, but they have to be, again, open to that, notice it. Does it change something for them? If they're going to be a skeptic anyway, they're just going to say, oh, that's just a dragonfly and you're at the water, so duh. But it's like you said, my extra evidence around that, well, that was a couple of hours. That dragonfly hung around me and just me, and nobody else. But also I was, again, in the moment of thinking about him, talking to him in just my mind and asking for signs too. So I feel like asking, I need to be open to receiving that in whatever way. So he has another sign that he has left for me. It's a particular coin. I won't say which one, but after he had passed, the rest of my family and I just were going on a trip, and we were taking the train to the airport. When I got to the train, I put my credit card in for some tickets, and the tickets came out where the change also dispenses. And there was not only my tickets, but a coin of this sort that he had already left me, that I already knew was a sign from him. And I thought, oh, that's so exciting, because to me that was validation of, oh, he's going on this trip with us to another city altogether. And then when we got to the other city, we get to the airport, we go to the baggage claim, and they've got these beautiful tiles on the floor. And the first one I see is a dragonfly. And I was like, oh, he took the whole journey with us, started with the coin, ended with the dragonfly. And so for me, again, that's kind of confirmation. It's a story. I am going to take it as evidence. But do I need it to be something I can actually hold in my hand? Well, the coins are. So it's just kind of, I have to have the right mindset too. So I'm open to getting those signs. And to me, that just made the trip so much more joyous for me. Or I could have sat in my grief and been skeptical and gone, none of this happens. I don't know if he's there or not. So being open to it really helped me step through the grief journey, if you will.
Yeah, the reason I asked that question was because if you're too skeptical or not open, I don't think you can have that experience. They would have whacked the dragonfly away, yeah. So but just tied into your exact kind of
Whack
story.
the dragonfly.
They would have whacked him away, or they would have literally ran from it. But like you said, it was more than just the dragonfly that came and landed and then disappeared again.
So, Anthony, you being the skeptic, I remember, I guess in my being, I'm not a skeptic because I always knew there's something there, whether it's the afterlife, aliens, whatever it from my
Don't
journey
mention aliens.
that I'm aware of. But I remember being in such a state of grief and things like physically happening in the room that I didn't, just being aware of things over the years. I was in a dense state of grief that I didn't think I would be aware, but things were physically happening, like lights shattering, pictures flying off the wall, like physical things. So I feel like I wasn't necessarily in a state of openness or wonder like I am now as my understanding grows. So for you, you had mentioned kind of being a skeptic and asking more questions. And then you saying after your father passed, something shifted. So what was it that made you open your allowance and acceptance of evidence of spirit?
Even your closed down example there, to me, that let's say you're deep in grief, right? So it's almost like you're still open to spirit, but you're just not conscious or paying attention or aware. But that's totally different than to me, who's like, there's nothing out there until I have evidence of this. I'm not believing shit all. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Actually, I touched on that last week. I gave up the organized religion, and then like I loved science, and stuff in quantum mechanics was blowing my mind. And I was like, how Christ is this happening? And it's like you've all the science explanation for why telepathy is possible and all of that stuff. And I was like, Jesus, and I'm very curious. So this was all sparking my curiosity. And then naturally I went to a medium after my father died, and I ended up in a circle. And then I went to that circle, and spirit knows me, obviously, because in that first circle I gave a reading and I knew what the hell I was doing. But I said stuff that the person took, and it just blew my mind. And then I left and I was hooked. And even though I still need more validation than most, and even though I do mediumship and all of that, like spirit knows that I'm still maybe could do with being more open. Still, like they still keep me curious by blowing my mind. We were in a class like a few weeks ago, and Carol was like, "Anyway, don't you give a reading there to the group?" So I was like, "Grand." So that's nothing unusual. But then she was like, and this other student is going to draw, so do spirit art. And I was like, oh, good now to see how this goes. Like, so here's my curiosity peeking up already. And then I just gave the reading, didn't think anything of it. And then it was over, and the girl was like, oh, I can take all that. Great. Reading went well. And then your man turns around and shows this picture, and it's literally a drawing of the man in spirit for this lady. Blew my mind, like how he's yapping to me and then telling the other guy as well how he looks. And then there's a match between the two of them. So then that ended, and I was like, fuck you now, spirit, because now I'm going to have to try spirit art because I'm like, what the hell is that? I want to draw them as well. Like, maybe my father died, and then because I wanted to know where was he, like that was totally unexpected. And now suddenly my father is gone, and I was like, where the hell is he? Now I want proof, and I want proper evidence, or where the hell is my father gone? So that's let's say the question. And then I was like, I'll go to a medium. And then because I'm naturally curious, spirit kind of took over from there and hooked me. But I still, and you know that I still go into everything with a million questions. I don't have that trust that you have from being kids. There's nothing wrong with that. I obviously chose that as my journey, in that it's going to be, let's say, more of a learning experience.
I just want to say that spirit art example, it's a great example of something very evidential and tangible and concrete, because you and the artist did not know, about this person in spirit ahead of time. And you're both getting information about him, and you gave kind of facts and information about him that this girl who was getting the reading could validate. But then seeing the picture and her validating, like, that looks exactly like the person you were reading. How else would either of you have known either of those things? You stuff about information, him, the picture about it. Yeah. So that's the kind of thing too, that maybe you look at the skeptic and you go, okay, well, how did I do that?
Yeah, but I'm not so skeptical then that I would torpedo that. Like, I can't explain that. And spirit knows then it's that kind of stuff that blows Anthony's mind. Do that shit for him, but I'm open to it. So that's why I think I get that stuff. I don't think I would have got things like that 10 years ago, for example, when I wasn't open to it.
Right.
So that's why I asked you a while ago about, do you think your signs would happen for someone if they were closed off or not open to spirit? Because it's kind of tied into manifesting. You get what you're open to in the same way that you manifest what it is you're kind of vibrating for,
Yeah, that's a whole other episode too, isn't it? Manifestation. Somebody write that down. Tracy was talking earlier about physical signs. I too get like the flashing lights at a particular light. And in my previous house where we lived, it was a particular light over the table would always blink. I knew that it was a hello, kind of a wink, if you will. And then we moved, and it was the same thing. It was a different light. And these were built-in lights. These are not a light I took from one house to the other. It wasn't a lamp or anything. It was built-in light. And the one light will blink randomly in the same way that the other one did. And I'm like, hello, hey, there you are.
I'm jealous that the two of you get that.
Well, are you open to it, Anthony? That's right. Do you trust it?
Do you know what it is? Spirit is like, fuck him now. He's not getting no flashing lights until he believes the other stuff first.
That's right. But instead, we'll give him a broken closet. And
literally.
You were telling us about earlier.
I was like, I told you the story before where I was like, can my dad hear me when I talk? Right. So I'll just tell you the story quickly. I was like, because anyone can do this. If they're loved one past. So I was like, my father is in spirit, can he hear me? And then I sent out the thought, and I was not in a good mood. I was pissed off, like annoyed. And I said out the thought, oh, Dad, like if you can hear me, make me laugh, change my emotion to happiness, because you can't do that. So in other words, I sent them an impossible challenge naturally, and then I just sat there like quietly, and the thought popped into my head, kind of like, oh, if you're waiting for me, you'll be waiting a long fucking time, because it'll be like a dripping tap. And I burst out laughing, and I was like, I did not think that. I put no processing into it. It was just like a joke that popped into my head. And it's almost like, we'd be talking sometimes about a download that you kind of get full joke in a split second. It's not like you hear it word for word, because people are often looking out for, they want to hear as if someone's talking slowly in their head. And sometimes it doesn't happen like that. You might just get the impression of the full joke all of a sudden or something. So it was that type of thing. I burst out laughing. He got an A+ for that one.
Oh, he so appreciates it. Was he a big coffee drinker, Anthony? I just had the scent of coffee wafting by.
Oh, he did. Yeah, I think actually I hate coffee, and he
There you
did
go.
drink coffee.
So again, further validation, maybe that was him giving you that laugh.
But that is, let's say, that's a personal experience, and then it's up for me to take it or not, And that was just such a drastic switch that I always remember that story, because that's probably one of the ones where that sign, that communication was internal. If I'm a skeptic, I will torpedo that and just say it's my own mind. But to me, anyway, all of the circumstances and scenario, it was definitely my dad. And I'll always remember that one. But it's on my list. When I go back, I'll check.
Our list of many questions. Well, here's another question. I'm a big dreamer. You guys know that. And I feel like I get signs and validation in my dreams when I dream of my loved ones. And even right after they've passed, they might appear to me in a dream. And I feel like we do have a conversation, or at least kind of, even if it's not a physical conversation, there's something that goes on. And I feel like that's a visitation. So do you guys ever feel like you get evidence in dreams, if you are a dreamer, or visitations in your dreams that help you go, oh yeah, I feel like they really were there for me and they still are present even in the afterworld?
I know that I dream, but I don't. I actually had a really weird dream last night, which I rarely dream, but it was really real, and it felt like spirit was there. So it's interesting that you asked that, but not necessarily dreams for me and as evidence, although except for last night randomly. But so yeah, I just feel like I do get weird sort of. For me it's even weird sort of evidence, but I think it's pretty funny. And so I think it's back to the thing which we started with. It's kind of like it's individual to who you are and what you see as evidence and what you expect. I would like people to be more open to lots of different ways of communication, because people will say they've seen, like Carol, you saw your grandmother. I never really saw a person, but evidence can come in so many different ways depending on who you are and how you accept evidence. I think more about it is like trusting that whatever it is, even if it's weird and wonderful, or let's say your dad always liked elephants and then you see an elephant on a picture. You don't necessarily need to see a giant elephant in person, or there's so many different ways.
It's like the people who ask for a rainbow and then they go around looking up at the sky and they miss the rainbow of the sticker on the car in front of them, or that kind of thing,
Right. Yeah.
We'll do an episode on signs and symbols and stuff as well. But I was just thinking when you were saying that, they are open to interpretation as well. Two of us could look at symbology of something or a sign, and two of us take different meaning from it. Point is, spirit knows what your meaning is going to be, and therefore it can be a sign for you and it mightn't be for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in a great way. Evidence from a medium, like another human person telling you something that they couldn't have known. Like, I'm so grateful that there are good mediums and that we can all do this kind of work. It's very nice to build your own personal evidence with your loved ones who are in spirit, but I think it touches a wider audience when somebody who's another person can validate it for you for something they don't know. I feel like that is some of the strongest evidence to build upon. And I think that's why we all enjoy that kind of work, even being skeptical of one thing or another through our lives. And sometimes it's just a day. If you're having a down day and you need a little something because you can't access it yourself, and somebody else can provide that for you, is really a blessing too. So,
well, I have to say that even as a medium, I am still blown away by the evidence that comes through me for somebody else. And because they get so excited about it, like, you could not have known that. And maybe it's something really kind of unique and kooky or out there or very special to them. And I take that as more evidence myself of, yes, spirit really is there. The afterlife does still exist, because how can I be talking telepathically, if you will, with a stranger I don't know and giving information about them? It's, even though I love doing it, I've done it for a while, it still blows my mind that, wow, this is a possibility. I love it.
I still ask myself how I do it. Give a bit of information, just say something, and I feel like it has no meaning. And then the sitter takes it like so meaningful. And then that blows my mind of like, how am I doing this, or how is this happening? That then is more evidence for me, for myself. So this is, even though I'm kind of skeptic, I still do the readings and I still do all the evidential mediumship.
I think Anthony's going to have to stay after class next week.
Yeah. Well, during that time, when you're doing it, right, you're allowing and you're trusting in it because it's happening. So
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, if we're trying to educate people on how they can explore what evidence is for them of afterlife, it all comes full circle back to like what you allow and trust in, and to build that within yourself and not let somebody else tell you what's not real for you. We can only speak in our own experiences, but through like a medium or something, we can give evidence to others that nobody else could have known. And that's great. But it goes back to trusting what you get.
But that's a learning process for me, right?
Yeah.
Whereas,
absolutely.
Carol, did you have that from a child?
Yeah, just trusted it immediately.
And Tracy, are you saying that you had that trust from a young age as well?
I didn't know where my people were. I thought maybe they were up there with the angels and the fairies and the gnomes and the aliens. Like I just feel like there's another world around, but I didn't really know like the level of like how communicative they could be and how you can now even carry that relationship on even though they're still not physically here. So yeah, I kind of had this ethereal thinking of like, yeah, something's there. So is that and that over there too. But I didn't know where to put any of it. You know what I mean? If that makes sense.
Yeah, but you're like, there's shit around me. Like, you're still allowing it. You're
Yeah.
trusting that it
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
there. Whereas that is a learning experience for me.
Yeah.
And Carol knows as well, like, that I've even given a reading. I'm like, oh, is this from spirit? She's like, you have to trust that it is. And I think that people who, let's say, don't have that familiarity with the afterlife or spirit from a young age, then it's a learning process for them. They have to learn to trust. They have to learn to allow it. And that has been my experience of it anyway. So that's all I can kind of speak to, you know?
Well, it is something that people who are currently in a deep state of grief have a harder time sometimes being open to that.
And for anyone that hasn't heard that episode already, it's Two Back, Finding Spirituality in Our Grief. All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. See you next time. Slán.
Bye-bye. Bye.